Good evening, everybody. And to Rabbi Prosnit and Cantor Novick, thank you very much for asking me to take part in this. And to Fred and to Miriam, I'm pretty speechless. My heart is pounding out of my chest after listening to what both of you had to say. I am the daughter of German Jewish parents. My parents were very fortunate that they were able to get out of Germany and did not have to go to concentration camp, thank goodness. The story I'm going to share with you, I've told at the synagogue a couple of times at my kids' bar and bat mitzvahs, but instead of me telling the story tonight, I have chosen to read my father's words. My father wrote a family history, thank goodness that we have, that he wrote in the early 1970s. And he was 17 years old in November 1938. He lived in the town called Eschwege in Germany. At the time that this, of Kristallnacht, which I'm going to talk about, he was away at school. So you will hear his story now. I will have to editorialize a little bit, but I think you'll get it. I believe it was November 1938 when stormtroopers entered the homes of all these Polish Jews living in Germany and gave them 15 minutes to pack, herded them on trains, which pulled up to the Polish border and made them walk across the border without their luggage. In retrospect, I think that the final solution had started. This triggered a gruesome chain of events. A son of one of those deported families, Herschel Greenspan, lived in Paris. He walked in the German embassy and shot and killed the first German whom he saw. The Kristallnacht followed. It was superbly well organized. All stormtroopers taking part in this were brought in from other towns so that they could not be identified by their victims. They entered the Jewish homes and smashed everything in sight. They set fire to the synagogues. Eschwege, my dad's hometown, was an interesting exception. And then they arrested all able-bodied Jewish men and threw them in concentration camps. This, according to Reich Minister Goebbels, was to keep them in protective custody, to keep them from the righteous wrath of the German people. What happened to the Goldschmidt family? It was interesting to say the least. I was in Alem, where my father was in school, and I heard the famous Goebbels speech on the radio. We were not permitted to leave the school. We heard that the synagogue in the city was torched. One of Our Lady teachers committed suicide by hanging herself in the attic of the girls' dorm. It was the beginning of the end. Now let us change the scene to Eschwege and what happened there. I have to explain some things that happened during the previous months. Jews from surrounding smaller towns had been simply told to get out, and so these villages and towns proclaimed their new status as Judenrein, cleansed of Jews. For some reason, a mistake was made by the usually very efficient Nazis, and the Kristallnacht happened in the city of Rothenburg-Fulda with all its horror one night early. News travels quickly, and two things happened that night which would prove important to my family. My father was nervous. Fati, which is what he called his father, took the small car and drove in our garden through the back gate. Then before going to sleep, he closed all the shutters around the house. The second thing which would have an impact on us was that Mr. Frankel, the synagogue shamus, who I like to think of as my Kenny, took 6 Sefer Torahs from the synagogue and brought them in his apartment and put them under his bed. One of those Torahs was our family Torah, which was in the synagogue since before 1830. It was to be the only Torah to escape destruction. So what happened that night? So Fati and Mutti went to bed that fateful night. They were awoken by pounding on the shutters and shouts, "We want the Jew." Mother said to Dad, "Lutz, run." And with that, Father dressed and ran. Mother knew not where. He ran to the attic, laid himself on the crossbeams. As the Nazis stormed in the house, destroyed the house, ripped the telephone wires, he opened an attic window and let himself to the ground by the drain pipe, jumped in the car and left. That night, all the Jewish men were rounded up in Eschwege. About a week later, with telephone service restored, he called home. he had gone, Fred, to Holland, interestingly enough. He called home. Mutti told him to come home. He went to the police. They told him to go home. He was to be the only adult male Jew from Eschwege who was not incarcerated in Buchenwald. After that period of time, my father and his parents were able to get visas to come to the affidavits to come to the United States. The visa was not granted to my grandfather and my grandmother. They went to Palestine, where my grandfather shortly thereafter died. Many other extended relatives did not make it at all. Some did, thank goodness. But my father did, and my father was told that he should go to America. So, and now my father's words again. Sad happenings have always a tragic, humorous side. I mentioned before that the Torah was one of 6 rescued by our shamus, Mr. Frankel, from the Kristallnacht. When I was packing my belongings to leave Germany, I asked my father about the Torah. He suggested that I go to Mr. Frankel and get it. So I hopped on my bike. Mr. Frankel said it was okay with him, but I first had to talk to Mr. Lowenstein, who was basically the head of the ritual committee. So I went to see Mr. Lowenstein, who promptly denied my request. After all, he rationalized, what would the congregation do with only 5 Torahs? The final chapter of the disaster soon to occur would obviously be that no Torahs would survive, and no Jews in Eschwege either. However, I was determined to get our Torah out of Germany. I went back to Mr. Frankel, who asked if I had talked to Mr. Lowenstein. I assured him that I certainly had talked to him. He gave me the Torah, and I raced on my bike home. The Torah was placed in a box, and soon after, those thorough Germans sealed the container, which was not opened until I arrived in the United States of America. And now to share with you, and I don't know if you can see this, this is now 22 years ago. I don't know if Rabbi Kroloff is here, but there is, I don't know if anybody can see it, Rabbi Kroloff with my daughter holding the Torah at her bat mitzvah. And also, I'm going to share with you the Torah. My daughter to this day, I believe, might be the only young woman who has ever read from this Torah. And there she is as a little 13-year-old reading her Torah portion as the Torah sat on my parents' bed before we brought it to Temple Emanu-El for her bat mitzvah. So that's a hopeful story. The Torah is now in my brother's synagogue in Annapolis, Maryland. It has been completely redone, so it's completely kosher, and it is used quite often, and it remains. So thank you, and to everybody, please be well.